Today's show covers rock and roll music as pictured on postage stamps and Cinderella stamps. We'll take a look at the stamps and the history behind the stamps. The development of rock and roll from blues and country western music was a reaction against the ballads and novelty tunes popular during the 1940s and early 1950s. The music represented a rebellion against the standards set by parents, schools, and other authority figures. Rock and roll was attacked for its presumed contributions to juvenile delinquency. In 1951, disc jockey Alan Freed coined the term rock and roll on his program Moondog Rock and Roll Party. Radio played an important role in popularizing rock music. With television's increasing popularity, radio stations were looking for a gimmick to attract listeners. Most importantly for young people, rock and roll was the first music targeted to their generation. Bill Haley, with Halley's Comets, inspired by the supposedly official pronunciation of Halley's Comet, recorded Rock Around the Clock in 1954. Shortly afterward, they followed with another big hit, Shake, Rattle, and Roll. When Clyde McPhatter joined Billy Ward and the Dominoes in 1950, he began a music career that would eventually lead him to become one of the biggest names in the rhythm and blues era. In 1953, he left the band to form his own group, the Drifters. On September the 9th, 1956, Elvis Presley sang Hound Dog on the Milton Berle Show in front of 60 million viewers. Halfway through the song, Presley stopped singing and Elvis rotated his pelvis, causing quite a stir. Elvis is regarded as one of the most significant cultural icons of the 20th century and is often referred to as the King of Rock and Roll or simply the King. Buddy Holly's breakthrough song, That'll Be the Day, was recorded in 1956 with the Crickets. In 1958, he began touring, and early in 1959, he formed a new band for a concert tour. On February the 3rd, 1959, Buddy Holly and other band members were killed in a plane crash in Iowa. He was 22 years old. Ritchie Valens had several hits, most notably La Bamba, which he had adapted from a Mexican folk song. 8 months into his career, he was touring with Buddy Holly's band. With a limited number of seats available on the plane, Tommy Allsup agreed to flip a coin for the seat with Valens. Valens called heads. When he won, he reportedly said, "That's the first time I've ever won anything in my life." He was killed in the same plane crash with Buddy Holly. Hailed as the monarch of soul, Otis Redding began his career in the early 1960s, a time when soul moved out of the rhythm and blues scene and into the rock and roll circuit. Ironically, his best-known song, and only #1 pop hit, was released after his death in 1967. A soul ballad, Sittin' on the Dock of the Bay, had been recorded 3 days before his plane crashed into a lake near Madison, Wisconsin, en route to an engagement. From the Royal Mail, here is a set of 6 stamps from 2007. The Beatles were formed in 1960 in Liverpool, England. They are the best-selling music act of all time, with estimated sales of 600 million units worldwide. Here is a Cinderella souvenir sheet from the Perforated Press, showing the Beatles' first 2 albums. The Beatles released 219 songs in less than a decade. Please Please Me, the first album, was recorded in just over 10 hours. This is another sheet from the Perforated Press showing Beatles memorabilia. You can still find websites today devoted exclusively to Beatles memorabilia for sale over 50 years after the band broke up. This souvenir sheet shows all of the Beatles albums as released in America. The British albums were split up into smaller albums for the American market. This is the top half of the sheet showing the individual album covers. My very first record album was Beatles 65. I remember buying it at a drugstore for $3.99. It took me 16 weeks worth of allowance money to buy the album. I still have it today. This is the bottom half of the sheet showing the individual album covers. Love is a soundtrack remix album of music recorded by the Beatles, released in November 2006. It features music compiled and remixed as a mashup for the Cirque du Soleil show of the same name. The album was produced by George Martin and his son Giles Martin, who said, "What people will be hearing on the album is a new experience, a way of reliving the whole Beatles musical lifespan in a very condensed period." This stamp was released in the Celebrate the Century sheets in 1999. In the animated 1968 film, the Beatles agree to accompany Captain Fred in his yellow submarine and go to Pepperland to free it from the music-hating Blue Meanies. These are Cinderella stamps showing Sgt. Pepper. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band was a groundbreaking album in 1967. Its release was a defining moment in 1960s pop culture, heralding the summer of love and rock and roll as an art form. Here are more Beatles Cinderella stamps from the Perforated Post. It did not happen, but just imagine the Fab Four singing Christmas carols. Apple is the record label formed by the Beatles. The Beatles, otherwise known as the White Album, released in 1968, was a double album that included 8 by 10 glossy photographs of the band members. The pictures appear here on this Cinderella block from the Perforated Post. Abbey Road is the final album the Beatles recorded. This Cinderella sheet from 2019 celebrates the 50th anniversary of their final masterpiece. It's hard to believe that the Beatles have been gone now for over 50 years. Woodstock was a music festival held in August 1969 on Max Yasgur's dairy farm in Bethel, New York, 40 miles southwest of Woodstock. Billed as an Aquarian exposition, 3 days of peace and music, and alternatively referred to as the Woodstock Rock Festival, it attracted an audience of more than 400,000 people. The first stamp is from the Celebrate the Century sheet from 1999, and the second stamp from 2019 commemorates the 50th anniversary. James Marshall Jimi Hendrix was an American musician, singer, and songwriter. Although his mainstream career spanned only 4 years, he is widely regarded as one of the most influential electric guitarists in the history of popular music, and one of the most celebrated musicians of the 20th century. Janis Lyn Joplin was an American singer-songwriter who sang rock, soul, and blues music. One of the most successful and widely known rock stars of her era, she was noted for her powerful mezzo-soprano vocals and electric stage presence. The Fillmore West was a historic rock and roll music venue in San Francisco, California, which became famous under the direction of concert promoter Bill Graham from 1968 to 1971. Beginning in 1968, it was briefly operated by a collective formed by the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, Quicksilver Messenger Service, and Big Brother and the Holding Company as a social musical laboratory experiment. John Lennon was an English singer, songwriter, and peace activist who gained worldwide fame as the founder, co-lead vocalist, and rhythm guitarist of the Beatles. His songwriting partnership with Paul McCartney remains the most successful in musical history. Here's a set of 10 stamps released by the Royal Mail depicting classic album covers in 2010. The covers were from the most iconic rock albums from the past 40 years. Tubular Bells is the debut studio album by English multi-instrumentalist, composer, and songwriter Mike Oldfield, released on May 25, 1973, as the first album on Virgin Records. Oldfield, who was 19 years old when it was recorded, played almost all the instruments on the mostly instrumental album. The album initially sold slowly, but gained worldwide attention in December 1973 when its opening theme was used for the soundtrack to the horror film The Exorcist. The untitled fourth studio album by the English rock band Led Zeppelin, commonly known as Led Zeppelin IV, was released on November 8, 1971 by Atlantic Records. The album was a commercial and critical success and is Led Zeppelin's best-selling, shipping over 37 million copies worldwide. It is one of the best-selling albums in the US, while critics have regularly placed it highly on lists of the greatest albums of all time. Let It Bleed is the 8th British and the 10th American studio album by English rock band the Rolling Stones, released in December 1969 by Decca Records in the United Kingdom and London Records in the United States. While no highly charting singles were released from the album, many of the album's songs became staples of Rolling Stones live shows and on rock radio stations for decades to come, including Gimme Shelter and You Can't Always Get What You Want. This set of Pink Floyd album covers was issued by the Royal Mail in 2016. Pink Floyd was an English rock band formed in London in 1965. Gaining a following as a psychedelic pop group, they were distinguished for their extended compositions, sonic experimentation, philosophical lyrics, and elaborate live shows, and became a leading band of the progressive rock genre. In 2017, the Royal Mail issued this set of 6 David Bowie album covers. David Robert Jones, known professionally as David Bowie, was an English singer-songwriter and actor. He was a leading figure in the music industry and is regarded as one of the most influential musicians of the 20th century. 8 album covers from Elton John pictured on Royal Mail stamps from 2018. Sir Elton John is an English singer, songwriter, pianist, and composer. Collaborating with lyricist Bernie Taupin since 1967 on more than 30 albums, John has sold more than 300 million records, making him one of the best-selling musical artists. The accompanying souvenir sheet for Elton John's Royal Mail stamps. On January 24, 2018, it was announced that John was retiring from touring and would soon embark on a 3-year farewell tour. Consisting of more than 300 concerts worldwide, the tour is expected to end in England in December 2020. Queen's top 8 albums are pictured on this 2020 Royal Mail issue. Queen are a British rock band formed in London in 1970. Their classic lineup was Freddie Mercury, lead vocals and piano, Brian May, guitar and vocals, Roger Taylor, drums and vocals, and John Deacon, bass. A souvenir sheet from the Royal Mail accompanied the stamps, also issued in 2020. Estimates of Queen's record sales range from 170 million to 300 million records, making them one of the world's best-selling musical artists. Another Cinderella stamp from the Perforated Post, featuring George Harrison's first solo album in November 1970 after leaving the Beatles. During the final year of his life, Harrison oversaw a successful reissue campaign to mark the 30th anniversary of the album's release. After this reissue, the Recording Industry Association of America certified the album 6 times platinum. In 2021, the Royal Mail issued 8 stamps honoring Sir Paul McCartney on the 50th anniversary of his second solo album, Ram. It is even harder to believe that Paul McCartney has been making music on his own now for over 50 years. In today's show, we covered rock and roll music as pictured on postage stamps and Cinderella stamps. Thank you for taking time to view the show. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to be notified of future releases.